has gone through the whole process, but we have now finished 90 days through the Bible. So that's a huge thing. Did anybody make it all the way through? I mean, look up. Yolanda. Well, I know, here's what I do know. A lot of people started. It is a hard project. It is relentless every day reading. But it's about discipleship and about that feeling of accomplishment from going from Genesis to Revelation. So we're in Revelation today because we're done. But I've said this a couple of times. The project wasn't so that, you're going to know the Bible. Because you don't when you're moving that fast. What you will get is a sense of the lay of the land and context and the sweep of it. Plus you get to say, you know what? I've read the entire Bible cover to cover. And so if you were thinking, I'd kind of like to do that, here's the thing. If you will read a little bit every day, eventually it may not be 90 days, but eventually you're going to have done it. Because if you do anything a little bit every day, it mounts up and makes a huge difference. So if you kind of were thinking, I kind of wish I'd done it, you still can. You can go through and read it. It's an interesting project. But I'm really interested in hearing from people who were moving through it quickly where you want to go deep, because that'll help us figure out new sermon series to do and Bible studies, because it's all this really critical discipleship. I read an essay just recently talking about the problem that so many churches have, particularly churches that are really all about mission. If you don't get your discipleship really going, if people aren't learning and growing in the Lord, that they're going to end up burning out on mission. People can get excited, all kinds of people can get excited about going out and doing things in the community, making a difference, but it's got to be fed by discipleship. But if you flip it around, so mission without discipleship pretty soon dies on the vine. But if you get really cooking on discipleship, mission is always an outgrowth. It's like mission is the engine, discipleship is the engine, and mission is where you're headed. So it's something for us to think about as we're looking at P3, small group and worship and mission. That small group and worship are hugely important. And we're going to be starting Wednesday nights on September 2nd. We're going to have classes. I'm going to be doing a Bible study on Sunday afternoons. You'll get more information about that. But really attend to this piece about discipleship. Reading the Bible in 90 days was a piece of it. But again, here we are. We land at Revelation. Y'all, poor Revelation. It is the most misunderstood book of the whole Bible. First of all, it's not a book, it's a letter. Everybody calls it Revelations, and it's not plural, it's just one, Revelation. And then we get to the real problems of this idea that it's telling about the end of the world, and you can calculate, if you just read it right and do numerology or something, you can figure exactly the day when the world's going to end. Everyone's looking for these signs. All of that is a misreading. It's fun, but it's a misreading. John, who was not, this is another thing, it was not the John who was the beloved disciple of Jesus that we credit with the fourth gospel and with the letters of John. That's like, why is it so confusing? Why do they have the same name? I don't know, but he did. And so there's John of Revelation. We call him John of Patmos because he was on an island, writing from an island called Patmos. And then there's John of the Gospels. Different guys, we know that because it's different Greek. And because John of Patmos, it was written so much later that he couldn't have been Jesus' disciple. So we have this teacher, preacher named John. He was probably from Turkey. And he had a circuit, we believe, of 7 churches. Can you throw that slide of the map up? Okay, so you can see Patmos off the coast. And then there are 7 churches. The letter of Revelation is written to these 7 churches, and the idea was that they would pass it one to the other. He probably was a circuit rider before he decided he just couldn't live in the Roman Empire anymore. But he would have ridden around this circuit. And so this letter that he wrote from Patmos was intended for all of these 7 churches. But even though it's not about the end of the world in the way people think, it does have a really powerful message for us as a church today. All right, you can take that down. Thank you so much. Gives you a sense kind of right there in Turkey. People talk about Patmos as a prison island. There's no archaeological evidence to support that. What people think happened, and you can get this just by reading Revelation, is that John, excuse my microphone here for a second. John felt like everybody was getting too comfortable with the Roman Empire. He had this idea that everyone was doing fine. The Roman Empire provided grain if there was a famine. They had health care. They had roads. They had police forces. It was cozy. Everything was good. They had a pretty good lifestyle. And so people quit depending on God. They got kind of complacent in their faith. And we see this today sometimes, that people say, ooh, I can't live in this culture. It's too crazy. I'm going to just go live in a commune in the mountains or something. That was what John's impulse was to get away from the Roman Empire so that he would have to be wholly dependent upon God. And Patmos was a pretty remote place, and that's where he went to do that. And he was encouraging his churches, if not to come away to Patmos with him, to at least wake up to the fact that God could, with a flick of a seal on a book, make the food go away, the health go away, all those things that people were really comfortable with. God was bigger than all of it. And so our dependence needed to be on God. So John paints this picture of how God is ultimately in control, and how everything that you're thinking you can depend on is just gone in a flash, and you have to depend on God. That was the point, was to wake people up because they were so comfy. And so right away, I feel like, that's a word for us. Here in the United States, we've got clean drinking water. We have a great standard of living. Even people in our country who are poor have so much more than poor people in other parts of the world. It's easy for us to get complacent. And so in the letter, at the beginning of the letter, there's an angel. John reports seeing an angel giving essentially a status report to each of the 7 churches on how they're doing with their Christian faith. And they all have different issues. Some are doing better than others. But the last one, Laodicea, it's really interesting because I feel like it's as much relevant for us today as it was then. The criticism the angel has is that they have become lukewarm. And the angel says, I'd rather you be hot or cold. Now think about that for a second. The angel is saying, I'd rather you be on fire for Jesus or an atheist. Right? Really? That's better than in the middle? Well, if you think about it, I've heard people say that people that they don't identify as Christian, but they also are not going to identify as atheists because that's too much of a faith position. Can you kind of see? That it requires too much faith to be atheist, to be that sure. So you find yourself in the middle of just kind of not knowing. The thing is, if you're one or the other, people know where you stand. There's some integrity in it, even if it's way over here. So the angel is saying, do not be here in the middle. Be either on fire or give it up. But there's a way in which if you're in the middle, you're kind of misleading other people and you're misleading yourself. But that's where we tend to get when we get comfortable. So this whole letter is about trying to get these churches to wake up and to be a little bit discomforted so that they'll depend more on God. Now, we take our lineage as Methodists from John Wesley, and John Wesley had a sermon that he preached on this where he talked about people who are almost Christian. Now, interestingly, Wesley was tough. He would not be somebody you'd want to go out and have a meal with. He was just tough. But which is good. He was in integrity with himself. But he said, look, even people who are atheists can be good people. They are kind to one another. They understand basic honesty. They can do good things for the world. That doesn't make you a Christian. That doesn't even make you an almost Christian. So Wesley said, just this business of being nice and civil to one another and doing for one another, no, that's not going to get it. Almost Christians are the ones who go to church on Sundays and they do good things for people. They speak out against injustice. They're kind. They try to give some. They do all these outward forms. They show up. They do these things. But they're not altogether Christian, which is Wesley's way of putting it, because they're just doing the stuff. They're not actually transformed inside. They're not doing everything in their lives for the glory of God. And they're not living all week long in the same way. he saw in the Church of England in those days, you had to go to church on Sunday as an obligation. It was a social thing, and it was a class issue. You would go and you would show up, but then people would leave and they would do whatever they wanted to the whole rest of the week. So he was really speaking about that too, this Christianity for show. But these almost Christians sound a whole lot like me sometimes, coming, showing up and going through the motions, but are we really transformed? Where does Jesus Christ figure into it? There's a book that was written kind of teeing off of Wesley's sermon by Kendra Kesey Dean about 5 years ago called Almost Christian. And she took a whole bunch of sociological data and a study that was done on young people and church. And she found that a lot of them stuck with church up through high school, but then left the church after high school because it wasn't relevant in their lives. And what she found was that so many of the churches had watered down their message to the point where it was all just about being nice. So that's sort of the almost Christian position, right? It was all just about being nice enough. And she called it, let me get the right term here, moralistic, therapeutic deism, which is 3 big words that essentially mean being good because it makes you feel good, with this idea that when I'm kind to others, I feel good about myself, and God wants me to feel good about myself, and God's watching me grow but not really intervening much in my life. Moralistic, therapeutic deism, and that is not Christianity. And so kids, when that's all they've gotten is, come on, be nice, they get that in kindergarten. They're on the rules, everybody's going to go back to school, and there's going to be rules on the wall that talk about how we treat each other. That's not Christianity, right? That's just how we live together in society. So it's got to be something more, and it's got to be here. So what it is when we are actually transformed and changed because of what we're hearing and what we're seeing, and it's not just on Sundays when we show up, but it's all the time, that what we do is for the glory of God. I know one place that is a stickler for a lot of people is giving. Wesley had a lot to say about money. So did Jesus. He said more about money than any other subject and how hard it can be. Wesley said, and you've probably heard this before, and it's simple, but it's not easy. He said, earn all you can, meaning whatever your particular gifts and graces and your particular abilities are, use them to the max to make money. So in England, when he said that, everybody's like, yeah, that sounds good. And so they're all thinking, we're going to make a bunch of money. Then he said, then save all you can. And he didn't mean put it away into accounts for yourself and your future. What he meant was live as simply as you possibly can. And he had a lot to say about that. He had some weird thing about animals. He did not want anybody to have pets in their house. He saw them eating meat and stuff, and he thought that was just atrocious. I don't know. He was a man of his time. You can have pets. I think you can. But you can still live really simply. It's worth looking at. And you live simply. You earn all you can. Then you live as simply as you can so that you can give all you can. So there's this idea built into that of with more gifts and graces, more ability, comes greater responsibility to give on the other side. That becomes this self-sacrificial love and this self-sacrificial discipleship that transforms us into more than almost Christians. And so if we want to turn up the heat on our faith, right now, just thinking about it, if the angel came and appeared to you, this revelation angel, and they were scary angels in John's vision, but okay, if they appear after you kind of get a grip back on yourself, what would they say to you? Would the angel say you're lukewarm? Would the angel say, what would the angel say? As I was thinking about that, I thought I'd kind of like that. Not because I would expect any kind of good report, but it would sort of be nice to get a clear, authoritative bead on how I'm doing. Like to have somebody say, okay, all right, here's the real deal. Wow, you've got to do X, Y, Z, and Q, and it would kind of be nice. But what would they say to you? Are you lukewarm? Has your faith affected every area of your life? So that when you're choosing friends, you're looking at all the different activities of your life, you're looking at it through a lens of faith? Are you giving as much as you can? Are you doing as much good as you can? I saw, we've just recently heard that Jimmy Carter has cancer. And I saw again him saying, I'm going to keep doing all the good I can for as long as I can. And what an amazing testament to faith. He could have retired and had an easy time, but he's been out there building Habitat for Humanity houses. Yesterday we celebrated the life of Jim Logue, who I still miss, sitting right back there, and I always will probably. Jim was a man of real faith, and it affected every part of his life. He was so much wanting to do 90 days through the Bible, but his eyes had gotten so bad that it was hard to read that much. So we talked about it, and he was just going to read a chapter out of every day's reading because he was determined. He was a disciple. He was all about his spiritual growth and sharing that with others and telling people about faith. He was red hot for faith. There's no way the angel would have said he was lukewarm. So that's our challenge, I think, is to look at where you are. Where can you turn up the dial a little bit? Are you in this lukewarm complacency where, you come to church and you're a good person? We do not want to be the church of moralistic therapeutic deism where we teach our kids just be nice. Because you know what happens? Our kids then leave. Over and over again, these studies show, if that's all it is, because you don't have to be Christian to be nice. So we've got to have more than that. We've got to have self-sacrifice and things that really matter. We've got to put more on the line. And we've got to say how Jesus Christ makes a difference in all of it. That self-sacrifice and that example changes us and makes us brave, like we sang about earlier. Jesus makes us brave so that we speak out when we see injustice. It can be hard, it can be scary to speak out because people might not like it. But we do. We stand up. If somebody's being bullied, you stand up for them. If you see other injustices, wherever you are in your life, if people are hungry, you figure out a way to get them fed. Rebecca Reed came in here, and she saw that there's a real problem for women in shelters. And so she's taking a stand to get our help to make a difference for them. You put yourself out there. And you've got to know that it was embarrassing for her to get up here and talk about that awkward topic. But she's doing it because women are counting on it. So as we do discipleship and we act out, let's let it transform us so that we not only are loving God and loving neighbor, that's what we do, which is our vision here at Genesis, but as we do it, we are changed and it becomes what we are. And then with that engine humming, nobody can accuse us of being lukewarm. Will you pray with me? Holy and loving God, we are grateful to you that we get to come to this beautiful church and worship in peace when we know so many people around the world can't. There are so many ways that our lives are comfortable and we can take it for granted. We can take our own ability to provide for ourselves for granted. Keep us awake to how all of these things are gifts and blessings. Help us to stay awake for you. Help us to be concerned about our community and not just ourselves. Turn up the heat, Lord, so that we will be on fire for you. And no one can accuse us of being lukewarm. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.